Dr. Francois Nader, it's such an honor to have you. I've been excited for our conversation and grateful for your generosity of your wisdom and your time over the course of this conversation.
Pleasure to be here, Jeff.
So the name of this series of conversations is Conversations That Leaders Aren't Having. And I'm curious, what's the first thing that comes up for you when you hear that phrase?
Many things come to mind. How did I get there? Is it luck, or is it being I'm smart, or is it because I got the right opportunity, or I got the right help at the right time? What does success mean for me and for others? What is my contribution now that I'm recognized as a leader? What has been my contribution? What will be my contribution? Leaders are recognized usually for their success. The best leaders I know, though, are recognized for their failures first and the lessons learned along the way. So the humility of sharing our screw-ups and things that did not go very well. People tend to think of leaders in their trajectory as being linear, this linear trajectory. It is never linear. It goes from ups and downs, back, up, left, right. And yet, ultimately, it could lead to a definition of success. Obviously, success is defined differently by different people. So these are the few things that come to mind.
When you think about success, and you go back 25 years in your definition of success then, maybe back even further, how is the definition of success different today versus 30 years ago?
I think 30 years ago, success was very egocentric, self-centered. It was my success and the next promotion or the next performance evaluation or the next big check. And then with time and probably age, success carries a completely different meaning today for me. It is how much did I contribute? Did I truly made a difference? What am I leaving behind? How many of the folks who believed in me, trusted me, are now successful on their own? So the definition has definitely evolved from being self-centric to being a contribution. And it was a transition, obviously, over the many years.
So you have the privilege to be able to pour into new leaders, new CEOs. What's the conversation that you have with them now about this definition of success?
Yeah, it is a conversation about being authentic. And the conversation I have with CEOs is, I frankly really do not care about what you define as success. What I care about is that your definition of success represents 100% who you truly are. So if their definition of success is making money, I don't have any problem at all with that. It's a good thing. But don't claim that your definition of success is to improve the life of patients, or don't find something else, because CEOs attract people around them who share their values, their beliefs, their culture, who they are. And if their definition of success is something that is very tangible, material, that's perfectly okay. I don't have any problem with that. Whether I will work with them or not is a different story, but it's not a judgment call. The key, though, is for CEOs or leaders to be truthful to what they claim is success for them.
Yeah, my experience, and I've had this personally, experiences we put on a mask or we present ourselves in a way that we think we should be, or we think we ought to be for the world. And I often think of that's a young person's disease, that we put on what we think we should or ought to in terms of that facade. That was the word I was looking for. How do you help break through that in your conversations, your mentorship? And to really draw out, who are you really? What do you value? Who are you authentically?
Yeah, actually, by simply saying that as a leader, one of your very primary accountabilities is to recruit, retain, and reward smart people. Okay. So if you're recruiting smart people, you cannot fool them for very long either. So you cannot at 8 o'clock say, well, my team is absolutely superb and I'm so proud to have recruited the smartest, the brightest. And at 8:05, try to fool them by describing something that you are not. So that's probably the biggest fallacy there. The biggest fallacy is we think as leaders that people don't see through us. No, they do. That's why we recruit them, because they're smart people. So I think the only cure to this is to have the courage and to have the willingness to be authentic and be who you are. And then, as I said a minute ago, you will end up recruiting and assembling around you people who like who you are. The other thing is, and I profoundly believe in this, whether you are there as a leader or you are not, your shadow is there. The leader is always there, whether they are physically there or not. Every word that they utter carries. Every non-verbal communication that they do carries. So I think it would be exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for any leader to hide who they are. I mean, they might hide it for a day or a week or a month. Eventually it will show up. And that's the problem, because the minute it shows up, all of a sudden, instantaneously, as leader, we lose our credibility. People say, oh my gosh, the man or the woman I was following and I believed in is not who they said they are. And all of a sudden, the minute you lose credibility, you lost it all, because credibility is one of those things that is very exceedingly difficult to recover.
Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine, especially in those early days, maybe their first CEO role, there's a lot of fear. Will I have what it takes? Will they like me? Will I have a job? A lot of fear goes into putting up that facade of what they think they should be, or they should, or they ought to be. There's a lot of fear that maybe never goes spoken about, and that requires a lot of vulnerability to be able to admit that and to do something and to do it differently. I'm wondering about as you, both in your own journey and supporting CEOs, that breaking through that fear so that someone can truly be vulnerable and seen for who they are, to being authentic. What's key in breaking through that what feels like a really thick brick wall?
It's trust. It is trust. So as chair, for example, working with first-time CEOs, it is building trust, building this rapport, this relationship, building the communication such as we say truthfully who we are and share our fears, share our concerns, our hesitations, share I don't have any idea what to do. Share I have a good day, share I had an absolutely crappy day. Share, listen, I'm not sure if I'm up to it, So in my opinion, there are a number of backbones, if you will, in companies, in building successful companies. And one of them is certainly the relationship between CEO and chair. CEO is a very, very, very lonely job. And frankly, there is no one you talk to. I mean, beside your family. And after a while, the family, having heard your story 15 times, they say, okay, well, why don't you leave work at work and let's do something else here. So the only person, frankly, you can share with is your chair. And this is why this relationship, and I learned it firsthand. I had a terrific chairman, Peter Tombrose. Without him, I would not have been successful. And to be perfectly candid, 50% of his time, Peter was my technical corporate mentor. 50% of the time, he was my shrink. You know, I mean, he played this dual role because most of the time I really did not need a technical scientific advice. I just needed to vent. Or what do you think? Or I had a good day or not have a good day. So this relationship between chair and CEO is exceedingly important. It's a relationship of trust, support, caring, and frankly, your success as chair is nothing but the success of the company and the CEO and their team, frankly. Ultimately, I'm very proud of all the CEOs I've worked with because ultimately they created the value, they built the success. And my pleasure, if you will, has always been to see them flourish and to see them grow up in their role and to see them contribute and to see them being independent one day and slowly but surely one of them, two of them, three of them will become chairs and they will play the role, you know. This is the paying forward that is extremely important.
Yeah, just the way you frame that, Francois, I mean, you said this relationship between CEO and chairperson is a pillar of the organization. I can be honest, I've never heard anyone talk about it in that way. I've heard reference to it, that it's important, but never have given it such weight as you just did, as calling it a pillar for the success of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with all my CEOs, and I'm blessed to have worked practically exclusively, with one exception, with first-time CEOs, and I'm committed to them. You know, I'm available to them 24/7. Why? Because the job of a CEO is a 24/7 job. That's kind of the definition of what is. And if their job is 24/7, then by extension, my presence with them is 24/7. And I've seen CEOs calling me at 6 a.m., calling me at 11 p.m., you know, calling me on a Sunday or on a Saturday. Why? Because we have this trust. And they know that I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to penalize. I'm not here. I'm here as to be their support. The definition is I'm here for them, you know. And once this relationship is established, which usually doesn't take long, because authenticity kicks in and they immediately see it, then the rest is pretty simple.
So what are the other pillars, if that's one that's not spoken about, at least in circles that I run in, what are some of the other pillars of a successful organization that maybe don't get as much attention, like that one?
Well, culture and values get some attention, but usually not as a backbone. For me, probably another backbone of an organization is what the company stands for. And what the company stands for usually is materialized, if you will, in a tangible way by the values they have and they live and they reward and they penalized around. This is extremely important. And again, same as the discussion we had a minute ago, it's not a judgment call. Every company has its set of values, whether it is defined or not defined, it is there. Every company has its culture, whether it's defined or not defined, it is there. And frankly, there is no good or bad culture. Here again, it's not something that is moral or immoral or whatever. It is what it is. And it attracts the people who are attracted to this type of culture, you know? Again, there is nothing right or wrong with it. But that's the backbone. Why is it a backbone? Because if you align everyone in the company around the values and you really embrace them and live them, then the values become the engine, the intangible engine, because we are all now rowing in the same direction. Okay, it's not the what. The what is easy, it's the how, and the how is defined by the culture. It's not what I do, it's how I do it. Now we can be perfectly aligned on the what, perfectly aligned, and you have a chain and everything is fine. If we are not aligned on the how, then we're in trouble. So if we don't, all of us, live those values and embrace them, and if they are not defined, and if they are not led by the top, tone at the top always, then I've seen company go astray, go in a different direction. Whereas I've seen over and over and over and over companies that are aligned and live their values, live what they say. Okay. I'm associated, I'm the chair of a company called Benevolent AI, and there are many things that attracted me to join this company. But the thing that I will never forget was I was flipping through that corporate deck, and then the last page of the corporate deck said, because it matters. You know, so when you think about it for a half a second, everything that everyone in the company does, they do it because it matters. You know, and there is a fantastic drive from top to bottom, and they are all aligned on the how. Okay, the what can be fixed. We can rejigger the how, the what. The how is intrinsic. It's much more complicated.
And in my experience with values, it becomes a check the box activity. Okay, we've defined the values. The plaque is on the wall. We talk about them in the annual reviews. But where, in your experience, is the street level of those values? Where really
the street level starts with not having plaques on the wall. The minute I enter in any companies and I see the values on the plaque on the wall, I say, well, that's not working. I happen to have lived such an experience where we define values. We spend millions of dollars trying to implement those values. It never worked. Why? Because no one can remember them. It's very basic. Okay. At LPS, we had 6 values. LPS was sold to Shire about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. I'm 99% sure that if you come across someone from NPS, they will remember what our values are. You know. Why? Because they were simple. 6 words. Everyone remembers 6 words. You know, when it becomes sentences and it becomes an art of literature, it doesn't work. It doesn't speak to your EQ. It might speak to your IQ because it's good, nice language. But the minute you read it, you lose focus after the 15th word. And second, you never remember them. And the other thing, frankly, are values. Values are lived. They are not dictated. They are not. It has to be embraced, and the only way to embrace it is, frankly, through the leadership, through the tone at the top. And people look at the leader, they look at the executive committee, they look at the next level and next level. They look at their manager, and they see how values are lived. And more importantly, are values, is everyone serious about them? In other words, are they rewarded? And if they are not followed, is there a consequence for not doing? And the minute we leave one person without consequence for not abiding by the values, everything falls apart. It's one of those things. Because we tolerate one exception, it means that we don't mean business.
Mm, mm. One of the challenges that I hear with organizations is they're living out, working to establish and live out the values is employees and team members, they don't know how to they don't know how to have a relationship with them. They think, is this about context? Is this a black and white rule of what's accepted and what's not? What are the conversations that you're having at all hands meetings, or that you had at all hands meetings, that are helping the entire organization really understand what we're talking about when you say values?
Yeah, well, and first and foremost, keep it simple. It has to be simple. Second, make sure that everyone understands before they joined that for them to be successful at this particular company, these are the values, this is the culture. So John or Mary, before joining, you need to make sure you understand that if for any reason these values do not speak for you, that's not the right place, you know. This is what we do. And then when they join, you again repeat the story and say, listen, for you to be successful, this is what it takes here, you know. And at every opportunity, you repeat the same thing. And it becomes ingrained because people recruit people who share their values. And all of a sudden it's like a snowball effect. It's probably challenging at the beginning. It becomes easier and easier the more you go. But here again, I mean, values and culture have to be rewarded, but they have also to have consequences, as I said, for people who don't follow them. And we need to be very surgical, very, very, very clear that we really mean business. But here again, I mean, looping back to your comment earlier when we started this conversation, those values have to represent 100% who the leader is. 100%. And as I often say, I mean, there are very few decisions that are completely selfish, egocentric that a leader makes. Very, very few, actually. This is one of them, because the company that they lead, it's their company in a way. And frankly, they have to be very, very clear about their values and the culture they want to see, you know, and it has to be theirs, because if it's not theirs, it's fake, right? So it has to be theirs, very well defined, and then embraced by the rest of the folks, you know.
Yeah. In the spirit of this discussion on values, I know one of your mantras, or one of the phrases that you abide by, is be prepared. And I'm wondering, what's the role of the values in the be prepared, in the thought around that phrase? Be prepared for uncertainty, be prepared for crisis, be prepared for emergency. What's the role of the values in that sense?
Yeah. So maybe the best way to describe it is, let me take the values that we had at NPS, and the values were integrity and respect, starting with these two. When we hit a crisis, we have to act in integrity, right? And we have to act respectfully to those involved, and respectful, frankly, to the patient, respectful to every stakeholder. But then when we move to the rest of the values, it is excellence in all we do. So if we are excellent in all we do, and that's not excellence to the nth degree, I'm saying it's the spirit, then we probably limit the risk of having something bad happen. Teamwork, very important. And again, if we put the teams together and put our collective wisdom, I think we can eliminate or reduce quite a bit the risk of errors. Accountability, you know, accountability is very important. Why? Because every one of us is accountable for what they do. And if I'm accountable and I am excellent in everything, or tend to be excellent, or aim at being excellent, and rely on my team with respect and integrity, all of a sudden we have the ingredients. Mistakes cannot be avoided. I mean, and frankly, crisis cannot be avoided. But I believe that with the right set of values, we can at least mitigate the impact of these crises. And then we had the value of fun. Because at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, frankly, you are prone to mistakes because you're not enjoying it. In our business in biotech, I mean, the only certainty is crises happen. That's really the only certainty. I venture to say that probably 70% of the crises that we have are predictable. And that's kind of part of the integrity. In other words, did I look at things? Was I excellence? Why they're predictable? Because our business is long. I mean, it takes years and years and years. And it's a series of small decisions that we take, very small decisions that accumulate and make big decisions at the end. But here again, if I reflect on the past, did I think that we might have a problem with this animal tox? And then I said, no big deal, we'll figure it out later. I recall that 5 years ago, we might have a problem with manufacturing, and we say it's not a big deal. Yet 5 years later, the FDA said it is a big deal. We have this data that was not entirely clear, and we fixed it. Come back and bite us, you know? So I think in 70, 80% of the cases, if we're honest with ourselves and do this introspection, we can find that the crisis did not emerge out of nowhere on a Friday afternoon as they usually do. There is a long history that either we avoided, or we ignored, or we did not know what we did not know. That's another possibility. Or frankly, we decide at that time, for whatever reason, not to care enough about. So that's what preparedness means. Preparedness means if we apply these values of integrity, the respect, and everything else, or whatever the values are, can we step out and look back and say, okay, what could go wrong tomorrow in a week or 2 weeks? Okay, but be very honest. Some companies decide to retain external consultant because we're all biased in our assessment, but that's a very useful exercise. Based on what we know, based on the history of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what could go wrong? And it's funny because, especially with the regulators, I've seen it over and over and over again. When you reread the communication, the correspondence with the regulator, you find those 2 sentences that were written that, again, 3, 4, 5 years later, are now a big deal and are jeopardizing an approval, you know? So.
Yeah, it reminds me of a phrase a mentor has said to me: values aren't really your values until they're tested.
Exactly. This is why we always add at all times. It's super easy to be respectful until someone really piss you off big time, you know, and you blow up. So this is why, again, I'm taking NPS as an example, but there are a number of others. We always added at all times. It's always easy to be excellent where you don't have to make a tough call and be tempted to cut a corner, you know? So the notion of at all times is exactly what you just said and your mentor suggested you do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's so easy to say, well, we've checked the box. We'll focus on that another time. one of my clients, he uses the phrase build the roof, put the roof on before it rains. And I think that speaks also to these values of they are the envelope. They're the envelope
Totally.
that
Totally.
holds the
Totally.
house
Yeah.
and everything that and all the functions that happen within it. And so many times CEOs, leadership teams, they leave the culture conversation, the values conversation to another time.
Yeah, but it's happening. It's happening. See, I mean, that's probably the fallacy. It's happening. If they decide to leave it to another time, it's happening in between. So either you control it and you lead it and you drive it, or it drives you, and by the time you find the time to deal with it, it's probably too late because the culture and the values have already been ingrained and rooted in your organization. And to make a transformation at this stage is virtually impossible. It's extremely difficult. And I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to convey the message that it's simple, easy, and hunky-dory every day. It's not. It's absolutely not. As with everything in our business, it's never linear. You go up and down, left and right. But as long as you keep the trajectory and you keep an eye on where you're going, I think it makes things much easier.
Yeah, your values are your values. Your culture is your culture, whether you explicitly define it and embrace it or you don't.
It is there.
Yeah, really powerful. One last question, Francois, and that is the conversation we kind of talked about the definition of success from 30 years ago. What is the conversation, if you could have a conversation when you were a first-time CEO, or maybe even before that first role, with that younger version of yourself? What would make up that conversation?
I think the conversation is make it worth it. Some things come and go. I vividly remember that I fought like a dog, and this was some time ago, to get a promotion. And really, I really did a lot of, I wanted this promotion. And, I said, oh my gosh, if I don't get it, I would be miserable, blah, 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 And I vividly remember, it's one of those things that the president of the company knocked on my door, showed up, came to me. I was sitting behind my desk, extended his hand and say, congratulations, you have it. Okay, shook his hand. Thank you very much. And it's funny because the minute he left, I felt a gigantic void. I should have been thrilled, right? I got the promotion. I'm it. I felt a huge void. And the reason being that back then, I was fighting for the promotion that I got. What I missed is the forest when I was focusing on the tree. In other words, a promotion for what? Is it worth it? What for? So the pleasure of getting the promotion lasted about 2.5 seconds, and then there was a big, okay, and so what? So it was probably the right promotion technically from a career progression. It was certainly not the right promotion from a fulfillment perspective. And what does this move brings? What's the value? What's the value creation there? Turns out that I leveraged this promotion to do other things, and the rest is history. But I always remember this moment where, as the young me, if you will, was focusing on the promotion, and it was totally the right focus, because the right focus would have been, where could I contribute? Is it worth it? What value do I bring? How could I continue or improve my fulfillment? And how could I continue to help patients, being a physician and in the business of helping patients? So these are things that probably in retrospect, and this moment stayed with me just because of that.
That's a powerful phrase. Make it matter. Make it matter. Well, this is, it's been awesome to spend this time with you, Francois. I'm sure we could probably talk for hours and hours.
With pleasure.
We'll leave that for another time. For now, for those that are listening or watching to this conversation and they're curious to learn more about you, where can they find you?
I'm on the web. They can find me if they look for me.
Well, in the recording or in the description, we'll put your LinkedIn profile at a minimum, and those other places where people can find you. Thank you so much. This was a real privilege and a learning experience for me. Deep gratitude.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for taking the time to listening to me. And I enjoyed our conversation. So thank you very much for the opportunity.